Good morning, GTS retail partners, and welcome to the next in our series of GTS Retailer to Publisher webinars. I'm Scott Bohr, your category manager for gaming specialty products. That includes role-playing games, miniatures games, and gaming accessories, all those fun little things like dice and dice towers that make gaming that much more experiential. Today, we're being joined by Mark Diaz-Truman and Chris Samson from Magpie Games. Mark is one of the co-founders of Magpie Games, and Chris is their director of sales. So they'll be on in just a minute to talk about some of the great products they have coming soon, as well as the catalog of Magpie Games currently available. If you're new to the channel, please like and subscribe the video so that we can make sure that you get instant access and instant knowledge of any new webinars that we publish. We do this on a pretty much a bi-weekly basis, about 2 a week. And it's a great opportunity for you to learn more about some of the vendors that we work with here at GTS and the products that they've got available, as well as coming down the line. So make sure you hit that like and subscribe, hit the bell so you get the notifications. And without further ado, I will go ahead and hand things over to Mark. Mark, take it away.
Like Scott said, I'm Mark Diaz-Truman. I'm one of the co-founders of Magpie Games. While we are a very new company in my mind, I've been role-playing since I was a kiddo. D&D second edition was like my thing for years and years. We have been around for a bit. We were founded in 2011 by myself and Marissa Kelly, who's my co-owner and partner. And over the last, like 12 years now, we've gone from a company that had just the two of us to now a team of 12 people who are producing, the best role-playing games and other game products that we think we can possibly make. We started off, Marissa and I, as a pair of folks who just wanted to make games. We thought maybe we'd start by making comics because we love comics, but that turned out to be really hard. I'm a writer, she's an artist, but we were like, man, comics are so difficult. And we actually met at a vampire LARP. Like that's how nerdy we are. So we were like, maybe we'll make a game. That'll be easier than making a comic book. And spoiler for anybody who's actually done any publishing, it's not. But Marissa and I really found a love for making games. And we were lucky enough to be part of Kickstarter when it had gotten started. So we went to Gen Con in 2011 and we met some folks there who said, oh, you should check out this new Kickstarter thing. And so we put up our first game, The Plays the Thing, which was a Shakespearean role-playing game in which you played actors kind of arguing about a Shakespearean script. And we put it up on Kickstarter after doing Game Chef with it, which is a little indie game jam competition. And we raised, we put it up asking for $500, hoping we'd have enough to print a few books. And we raised a whole $5,000. And we thought we had just won the damn lottery. And fast forward just 5 years, Marissa and I were part of the team that put together the 7th Sea second edition Kickstarter, which at the time broke all the records for Kickstarter and raised $1.3 million. And there were definitely a lot of times in between where, we felt like we didn't, how is this happening? How is all of this unlocking so fast? And in retrospect, it's very clear that we were one of those companies that got in on the ground floor of Kickstarter. And we came in at the right time and the right moment when the industry was beginning to open up to new ideas and new kinds of games and new formats, and where Kickstarter was giving us the capital we needed to actually invest in our own teams and build our own products. And so, in addition to working with John Wick on 7th Sea, we also worked to build our own products. And one of those was Masks, A New Generation, which you may have heard about. Brendan Conway, who we were working with as a writer, came on board to do Masks with us. And he came on in 2014. Took us a couple years to get Masks out the door, but that was one of the big projects we did early. And then we did it again with Sarah Doom and Strix, Beltran, and Marissa for Bluebeard's Bride a few years later in 2017 and 2018. So we've had this wonderful convergence of a designer-owned company, where the people who are making the games are actually the same people who are managing the business, with the capital we need to bring on also really wonderful support staff. And so if you look at the next line, Miguel Angel Espinosa does all of our graphic design. He's the creator of Nahual. You can see his work on Bluebeard's Bride to start, and then of course on Root, on Cartel, which is my Mexican narco fiction game, and now on Avatar Legends, which I think is maybe the prettiest freaking book we'll ever publish. Liz Tepredickel, who's our project manager, who came on for Avatar specifically. She's the genius who's managed to make Avatar come out somewhat on time, despite us having about 5 times more backers than we thought we would. Kate Bullock, who does all of our community management, Kickstarter response, customer service. Kate has built an amazing Discord that we have. I think it's got about 7,000 people in it now, constantly talking about our games. And she also runs our CPP program, which is the curated play program where we pay professional GMs to run our games. Last year, I think we ran something like 1,400 games over the 1,400 sessions of role-playing games online. Chris Samson, who's on the call with us today, is our new director of sales. He joined us last November. Chris, do you want to say hi real quick?
Greetings, everyone. It's so nice to be here, and I'm so honored that we're partnered up with GTS moving forward.
Great. And Chris is handling our web store and all of our distribution. So he is definitely the man who knows what we have in the warehouse. But he's supported by Derek Kipchinsky and Adam McEwen, who both have been working to deliver books. Obviously, we've reached a scale where we don't ship every book we sell, but for a long time we did. And Derek was a really crucial part of the business. He's actually the very first employee we hired before Marissa and I even took a paycheck. And Sam Seltiel is our director of marketing. She is in charge of sort of getting out press releases, working with the press, taking care of our social media. And then finally, Christy Cardenas is our agent. She helped us negotiate the deal with Viacom for Avatar, and obviously the deal with Leader Games for Root. And she has just been an absolute powerhouse in helping us take our business to the next level since 2018. So this is us. This is Magpie Games. And one of the things we're really proud of is that in addition to being one of the larger RPG companies in the industry, we're also one of the most diverse. I'm a Latino game designer. Marissa and I own, so like 90% of the company. And because of that, this is a very much minority owned business. We are really passionate about bringing diverse voices to bear. And so we sometimes joke that, we're basically the Fast and Furious team. We do have a Paul Walker, but we are really, really coming from different perspectives. And that means that sometimes in the office it's a little contentious. We don't always agree. But we have really invested in a collaborative mindset where, our team is devoted to making the best freaking games we can possibly imagine. And that's what gets us motivated to come to work every day. And sometimes it means that things are complicated and slow, but we are so excited to have the opportunities we do. And our team works really, really hard to honor and deliver on those opportunities. If anybody wants to talk more about, us and how we got started and our story, I'm always open to it. But I think the most important thing for us in the last few years is that in 2018, we realized that a lot of what we were doing was kind of living at this weird border between kind of the indie community where things are edgy and interesting and cool, and a much wider audience that we thought we could tap. And so if you look at our projects in 2019, 2020, and 2021, I think you've seen that we are really interested in cracking the barrier that has gotten weaker and weaker in our mind, a thinner and thinner glass wall between what used to be regarded as indie products that only a handful of people would even know exist to a mainstream role-playing game like Avatar Legends, the role-playing game that is going to reach, maybe over the course of its life, 250,000 people, right? And so, a lot of what we're doing in the last couple of years is a big shift and a big change for us. And so we've tried a lot of different things. And some of what I'm going to talk about today are products that we think have actually done really, really well for their size and scope, and that we are really excited to continue to grow, as well as some of the exciting opportunities with Root and Avatar that are already big, just guaranteed to be hits at this point. Like we've sold just a ton of Avatar books, and we think that people are very, very excited about playing it. And we haven't even begun to scratch the surface of the 2.5 million views, for example, that of people who watch the Avatar Legends, the RPG trailer. So, all right, so in terms of who you all are going to be dealing with, for the most part, it's going to be these three folks. Myself, I deal a lot with things like, billing, or if there's any issues or problems. I'm also probably the only person who can keep track of whether this one random thing that we once sold is available in retail. So Chris, thank heavens, is building us a new database for that. Sam does a lot of our marketing, and so you'll see sales sheets or other press releases and things from her. But a lot of her work also is focused on talking to the public through social media and earned media. And then of course Chris, who introduced himself as our director of sales, and Chris, will be the primary point of contact moving forward for everything that we do to make sure you all have books to sell. He also can provide resources that we haven't yet provided. So if there's something that you all need, please let Chris know. And on that same token, we talked a little bit about curated play program. We do have games available pretty much every day. It's just kind of strange to me to say so, but we run at least one Magpie Games session every single day of the week, except for maybe like major holidays, because there's always somebody who wants to play a game and there's always a GM willing to run. And Sam can get you a ticket to virtually any game that we have. And in fact, if there's a big push for something, if all of you want to try Root, we can set up a special game just for folks who are on the sales team, and just so you all can see how the game works and what its features are. And that would pair you with a professional GM who's run, at this point, probably hundreds of sessions to show you how the game works and what's great about it. And we're thrilled to do that. I think running role-playing games is super fun, super interesting, and we're definitely down to show you what we can do. Like I've said, we were founded in 2011. Almost all of our games are funded using a Kickstarter model. We go to Kickstarter usually when the game is done, often when there's big chunks of writing or art left to do, mostly so that we can calibrate the scale of the project to the scale of the interest. What we do for Cartel, which raised, $70,000, is very different than what we're going to do for Avatar when it raises 10 million, not just in what we can do, but in what we're going to invest in the project. In 2021, we funded Avatar for $10+ million, and that has really shaped our experience of the last year. It's been an interesting ride to suddenly have to be working with 80,000 individual backers, but we are doing our best to think about what that looks like at scale. If anybody's familiar with the project, you'll know that we released the PDF this week to all the backers, the preview PDF. It's basically done, but in order to do so, we had to design whole new ways of delivering a DRM marked file to 80,000 people at the same time. So we are very familiar with what it takes to build new things. But we also have 9 major product lines. So we are working across a lot of different dimensions, including, of course, Root and Avatar. And our games are mostly what are known as powered by the apocalypse games, which used to, I think, be very, very, very niche and indie, but has become much larger as people have grappled with its accessibility. It's very easy to start, and with the fact that it offers very different experiences from what has been done before. So, we have games that are urban fantasy like Urban Shadows, zombie apocalypse like Zombie World, feminine horror like Bluebeard's Bride, superheroes like Masks, fantasy adventure like Root, and now Avatar, which is really kind of a unique thing to itself, but is honestly a young heroes game about changing the world for the better as young people. So our focus, as I said before, is on creating innovative, high quality games. We are not going to do a project that we don't think breaks barriers, period. We are never going to do a project that we do not think is actually challenging something about how role-playing games are made and what they're supposed to do. For us, for example, for Avatar, I played a lot of licensed RPGs in my life, and I have always wanted an awesome RPG for something like Avatar where I believed that the system and the play was going to be excellent, and that was our focus. It's easy to put the Avatar logo on something. It's hard to design a game and work with Avatar Studios to create setting materials that are unique to that property and really drive home what that property is about. And we spend a lot of time highlighting the voices of diverse and marginalized creators. With Avatar, for example, we brought on a team of Asian designers from several different communities to help us make sure that game reflected the essential Asian setting, and indigenous creators as well to reflect the north and south water tribes, or northern and southern water tribes. And we saw that not as a cultural consulting thing we had to do to get their sign off, but instead an opportunity to feature the voices of creators who are often overlooked. And we are really passionate about the work they put together, and it's been an incredible experience. We have cool. So there's a question here: what makes the Powered by the Apocalypse system unique? So basically, Powered by the Apocalypse has a lot of features that I think people confuse for the game. So you might, if you've ever played the game, you might say, well, it uses 2d6, right? And that's fine. A lot of Powered by the Apocalypse games have a very simple resolution system. That is, you roll 2d6, and that tells you what happens. So in comparison to something like Burning Wheel, where you're rolling tons of d6s, or Shadowrun, tons of d6s. So you might think that's what's important. But for us, what we think Powered by the Apocalypse is as an idea is that the game system resolves around narrative beats instead of success or failure. So, for example, in Avatar Legends, one of the moves you can make, which is a move is when the mechanic kicks in, is to call someone out on their values, right? Which is to say that if you meet an NPC who you think said maybe they value community, right? You as the player aren't going to try to persuade them through your persuasion stat, but instead you trigger the move, call someone out on their values, and you roll with the idea that you are doing a narrative moment in the fiction, right? In Cartel, one of the narrative moments is get shot. So like it's a narco fiction game. It's based around Breaking Bad and Sicario, and therefore getting shot is this moment where the dice tell us what happens next, right? And so a lot of role-playing games, I think we are sort of comparative in their nature. You roll a die to see if you can hit somebody. You compare the amount of damage they do to your hit points. You look at whether a sword is strong enough to break through armor. Powered by the Apocalypse game focuses on narrative moments that resolve in interesting ways, meaning that there might be partial success or partial failure. There might be full success at a cost. There might be failure with new opportunities. And every one of those narrative moments is encoded into the game itself, meaning that a move like Cartel is a great example because it's so on the other end of the spectrum. A move in Cartel like justify your behavior because people in narco fiction are constantly lying is different from Avatar's plead with someone, in terms of trying to motivate them with their best interests. So we like Powered by the Apocalypse because it's high on player agency. A lot of what players get to do is to act on the narrative beats that are essential to that genre or that kind of story. And it's easy for GMs to run because it's very low prep. Rather than having to design an entire encounter and hope that the PCs arrive at that encounter, you follow those narrative beats. Of course, that makes it a challenge sometimes. It's very improv focused, and some people find it to be a little bit too much work, right? Or too improv. They want to have that prep work and show up with the minis, and that's great. We think that's awesome. But what Powered by the Apocalypse allows us to do, and I think why it's especially popular with younger players and with players who are newer to RPGs, is that it gives us the ability to tell a GM, you do not have to plan out 17 encounters and railroad your players towards one of them. You can instead follow your players' actions, and the game will support you in developing the story as you go. And so we could talk a little bit about that with each one of these products, but the core there, I think, is that Powered by the Apocalypse moves role-playing games from being about a series of mechanical interactions. This isn't true for all role-playing games, but certainly some of the big ones, into a space of a conversation about narrative beats that unfolds in line with the genre and the story that you're trying to tell. So, Phil, I hope that explains it. If you have any further questions, please drop them in the chat. I will talk about game design all day, so I'm happy to answer those questions and be able to sell them, how to sell them and how to talk about them. But I think the real thing for PBTA and why we chose it for Avatar is it allows us to encode the setting and encode the genre into the rules of the game while also giving players tools that are easily accessible to them, because each one of those narrative beats is clear. When you call someone out, roll this stat. On a 10 plus, this happens. On a 7 to 9, that happens. On a miss, the GM tells you what happens. And that flexibility makes for a really fun, engaging experience without necessarily needing to like master the whole system. And I want to be really clear here. We love systems that are high system mastery. I play a lot of Burning Wheel, but we really think these products are ones that have a mass appeal because they give that opportunity for players to jump in with both feet in session one. All right, great. So let's talk about one of these products. So first one, this is our first real big hit. We crowdfunded it in 2015 for like about $125,000 between Kickstarter and the immediate post Kickstarter crowdfunding through BackerKit. And it is Masks, a new generation. Masks is set in the megapolis of Halcyon City, which has had multiple generations of superheroes before them. There's Gold generation of like kind of cheeky and fun, Golden Age heroes. There's a Silver generation where we get characters who are, beyond powerful and warping space and time. And then there's a Bronze generation where, we have Alan Moore writing for the comics and everybody's, dark and conflicted and morality is gray. But now there's a new modern generation. And when you think about comics, it's characters like the new Miss Marvel. It's characters like Teen Titans. It's characters like Young Justice. It's honestly Spider-Man in the MCU across his 3 movies. And with those characters, they have grown up in a world filled with people telling them what to do. And so in this game, you play heroes who are defending the good and truth and justice and fighting supervillains and going to prom and doing all the things young superheroes do, but you're always doing it with the idea that there's an adult right around the corner who wants to tell you who you are. And the coolest thing I think about this product from a gameplay perspective is when they tell you who you are, your stats can change. So when Magneto tells Pyro, "Oh no, Pyro, tell me your real name, not your fake human name, but your true mutant name," Pyro's stats shift and he becomes better at using his mutant powers and worse at fitting in with ordinary people. This is an incredible innovation for me because it allows us to kind of track your character's arc as you play. And it makes that moment where an adult tells you how the world works or tells you who you are into an exciting narrative beat. It's exactly the kind of thing I was talking about where it would be kind of hard to do that in D&D, right? I mean, this is just not how D&D works. But everything about Mass is built for those stats, labels, freak, mundane, superior, danger, to define the character and then let that character's definition shift over time. For the product itself, we have 3 supplemental books, one of which, Masks Unbound, is probably one of our best sellers, which allows you to go to space and have alternate realities and all the usual multiverse stuff. We also have 2 card decks and a dice set. The dice set is coming. We did. This is a good example of how we have changed. The original Kickstarter dice set was just some dice we got from Chessex. We're actually having a new set of dice that are going to be made by Q Workshop that are actually retail friendly, and those will be ready a little later this year. So we'll let you all know when they're available. But over the past 6 years, this product line has brought in over $350,000 through direct online consumer sales. So this is a huge product for us. And $30,000 through retail and distribution. And we think that $30,000 number is kind of low. I think this is one of the products that we can sell a lot more of, especially as people become familiar with Powered by the Apocalypse. It's not just us. There are many different products coming out right now that are using PBTA and pushing the boundaries of what it can do. And I think Masks is one of these games that I would say, half of our CPP games have been Mask games. This is a very dedicated and loyal community, and they are excited to bring new people into the fold. And I think this is a real place where we can see quite a few more sales on the retail and distribution side. Um, I love that people are throwing stuff in the chat. If anybody has questions about a particular thing and you want to throw something in the chat, that's great. We can also come back at the end, but I'm going to go ahead and move on and talk about some of our other products. But I do think Mass is one of our strongest. Zombie World is another Powered by the Apocalypse game that we've put out in the last couple of years. Unlike Masks, it is not a traditional role-playing game where you print out character sheets and roll dice. Instead, it is a card-based tabletop role-playing game that brings the stories of The Walking Dead or Dawn of the Dead, or 28 Days Later to your table. And the way that it works is that rather than have any sort of printouts, you build your character through 3 random cards, one for your past, one for your present, and one for your trauma. Your present card is face up. It's like whatever role you've taken on now in the zombie apocalypse, but your past is face down, which creates this sort of almost like Lost or The Walking Dead, where we find out the guy who's currently the community's enforcer was an accountant before Z-Day, right? And that's secret information that becomes revealed over the course of the game. Your trauma is similar. When you have whatever sort of damage you're carrying with you from the end of everything is also secret until it's revealed. And that allows us to tell stories that are very true to this sort of who are you kind of fiction, like The Walking Dead, where you've had to forge a new personality after the apocalypse. But it also lets you build a character quickly. So if you get bit by a zombie and die, you can bring a new character in right away. The game is really built around enclaves, meaning you select at the beginning of play whether your game is built at a hospital or it's at a prison or it's in a farm or a mall. And that becomes sort of the central location around which all the characters orbit and interact with each other. And in addition to the core box, we have 2 supplemental decks, one the mall and one the farm, that add new cards to the box and give you new opportunities. We raised $60,000 for this one on Kickstarter, but over the past 3 years, we've brought in another $50,000 in web store sales and retail and distribution. Given that we only quote unquote only raised 60 grand for it on Kickstarter, the $15,000 in retail and distribution in the last year and a half or something, since it's been available 2 years, has actually been really incredible for us. This is a product we're seeing a lot of retailers move who know nothing about our other games. They've never heard of us, don't know anything about us, but they can point to this product and say for $25 you can be in the world of role-playing games. If you want to start role-playing, this is a great place to start. And it has everything in the box. And that's led to some situations where when we first debuted this at Gen Con, I believe in 2019, yeah, it was the last Gen Con we went to, we had somebody come and buy the game on Friday, and then on Saturday morning come back and buy all the supplements. And we never had that happen before, right? Because usually people buy a game and then they have to go home and play it. And we asked this guy, well, why did you come back? He's like, oh, I played it last night. I got home, opened the box, got all the cards out. We played the game. It was freaking awesome. I want to buy everything else. And for us, that's really what makes Zombie World special. And when we talked about making innovative, high quality games, we think that the world of people who want to play role playing games is way bigger than the people who are willing to learn how to manage, the process of a big book that you read through and internalize. These kinds of role playing game products that offer new ways to approach RPGs, we think can be really big over the next 5 to 10 years. And Zombie World has this combination of a very approachable kind of story. Everybody's seen a zombie movie with a form factor that allows you to get to playing within 15 minutes of starting to open the box. And that for us is the goal. And we have talked to people who've played 20 or 30 sessions of this thing. So it does have that ability to spool out over time. But your character may only make it through 3 sessions where you have to make a new one. Right? Cool. So Zombie World, I think, is again one of those retail products that could do a lot. Wizard Kittens is a very sort of a strange departure for us, but one that we were really excited to try, and that was to do casual card games, right, instead of role-playing games. So Wizard Kittens is, I think, at this point, pretty much our only non-RPG product. But in it, you play kittens who have accidentally released curses from the library's restricted section, which means that many of your fellow kittens are cursed. There are monsters that have escaped, and now you need to put them all back in the library and use your magic to solve all these problems before you are caught by the librarian, Professor Whisper. And in play, what this looks like is a semi-cooperative, meaning you lose if everybody loses if Professor Whisper catches you. But it is a set collection game in which you must build recipes to put the spells back away, to get rid of the monsters if you're using the monster expansion. And it's sort of similar to Sushi Go or Unstable Unicorns, where there's adorable art, as you can see on the box, that's paired with a fairly simple game that has a lot more complexity than you might think when you actually sit down to play it. Every single card has adorable kitten art. One of the things we're really excited about was having Marissa's talents as an art director brought to bear on a family-friendly product. And this is actually her idea. We were talking about, we should make a card game. It'd be so much fun. And she was like, well, it could be Wizard Kittens. It's kind of as a joke. And Brett and I looked at her and was like, tell us more. What do you mean? Right. And from that came this game in which you play adorable kittens who are wizards. We crowdfunded this one in 2019 for $225,000. And in addition to the core box, which has everything you need to play, we have Magical Monsters expansion, a card sleeve pack to sleeve all the cards, and we have an adorable Wizard Kittens plushie. It's pretty amazing, and we're excited to move those at conventions. But we also think they're great in retail, and they're great. They sit right next to the product, and it's the plushie. We'll see if Chris can find a picture of it for you all. But it's Cinder, who's the cat on the front of the box. Unsurprisingly, Cinder is our cat. Marissa and I own a cat whose name is Ophelia, and she wouldn't let me name this kitty Ophelia, which I was very upset about. But Cinder is very popular with folks and is a lot of fun as a character with the little hat and the giant book. So over the past 2 years, the product line's brought in $10,000 in web store sales. People aren't coming to our page to look for this because it's $60,000 in retail and distribution. That's really where this product is hit, is when you see it on the shelf, you are interested. We recently moved a bunch of units into Barnes & Noble as a Barnes & Noble exclusive. They were really excited about it. It's on shelves there. And we think this is, again, a product that really can connect with a new audience, and we'll just continue to ride that wave of more and more and more people playing hobby games, because this is a hobby game that you can get into really, really easily. In terms of the overall complexity, it has this sort of push your luck mechanic as you get closer and closer to Professor Whisper being drawn from the deck. And for us, we wanted to create a game that you can play with kids, but that has optional elements that complicate and increase it. And so it's a casual game, but we do really think of it still as a hobby game. It has this capacity to be a game that you play in between like that takes 15, 20, 30 minutes that you play in between other games with actual, other adults. It's not just a game for kids. And I think that match is something that has really made this product stand out in the long run, which is that it's not just a little casual push your luck game. It has some cool strategic elements, some semi-cooperative elements that really push it into a space of, in our opinion, being a true hobby game that has that capacity to be sold in hobby stores to folks who like games, not just as a trinket for kids. And then finally, of our available products, and narrowly available as the pandemic has continued to challenge us on international shipping and printing, Root the RPG is scheduled for the street date of March 9th, which means it comes out next week. And it is the officially licensed RPG for the Leader Games award-winning board game Root, a woodland game of might and right. In 2019, we crowdfunded it for $750,000. This one surprised the hell out of us. I mean, we're always surprised when we have any sort of hit. I mean, it is always something you just never know what's going to happen when you go to Kickstarter. We had hoped here to raise, $150,000, $200,000, but instead we attracted something like 7,000 plus backers, which is just huge for us, to Root and to Root's World. We are super proud of this game. It has attracted an awesome audience of players. It has made the Woodland Game of Might and Right, the original board game, come to life in a really new way. And it has sold a ton of books. When we put it up for pre-order in November, I think it was, we were stunned by the traffic to our website of folks who had not yet have it. And we have sold more than $75,000 already in pre-orders before anything has gone on sale, and another additional $100,000 in retail and distribution orders. And all of that has happened in the last 2 to 3 months, right? The whole book takes place in the Woodland, if you're not familiar with the board game, in which multiple factions, including the Marquise de Cats, Marquisats, and the Erie dynasties, the birds who used to rule the Woodland, or the Woodland Alliance, the upstart revolutionaries, are competing to rule the Woodland, which is an interconnected set of clearings. You play vagabonds who are mercenaries and outsiders who wander from clearing to clearing, having adventures and working for or against those factions. And because of your unique capabilities and your role in the social system, you often are the force that tips things one way or the other. The board game features one vagabond. For the purposes of the RPG, we had people put together bands of vagabonds, and so you're like a little band that wanders from town to town having adventures. The game is anthropomorphic animals, and yet it has a kind of edge to it, because it's a little bit more Game of Thrones than it is Redwall. There are different people competing for the Iron Throne, in this case the rule of the Woodland, and you are the people who might decide who gets to sit on it. And so obviously everybody wants you, but some people hate you. And that kind of creates this dynamic where every choice you make matters. But in a lot of ways, you're having a pretty traditional RPG experience. You go from place to place, you have adventures, you make friends, you make enemies, and you grow as vagabonds in your power and skill and strength. You forge new gear, you get new abilities, you level up more or less. And therefore, I think it's connected with people because it brings a lot of what we've done in other products into a space that's very familiar to them, i.e. a space in which they get to play fantasy adventurers. The book is gorgeous. Miguel's layout for it is amazing. Marissa worked with Kyle Farron, the original Root artist, to bring to life a whole new set of art pieces for this world. And it has a lot of Redwall warriors and other anthropomorphic animal games in it, and it's similar to games like Wanderhome, which again I think animals right now are really hot because it's a way for people to play in a fantasy world without necessarily invoking maybe some of the ugliness of fantasy settings, where we're having deeper conversations in our industry about stuff like the role of race, right, or what it means to have evil societies, and how those things may not actually be very much in keeping with people's sort of modern aesthetic about adventure. So Root offers us the opportunity to kind of reset that conversation, have a ton of cool fantasy adventures, but not worry that we're going to traipse into some sort of strange racial politics, because you're dealing with birds and beavers and mice and otters and foxes and lizards, and all of that is a really exciting way to approach role playing. We are probably going to do another supplement for this puppy. There's 2 more factions that they've introduced, but right now we do have a whole bunch of cool products available for this. So I'm going to walk you through it. First, we have the Travelers and Outsiders supplement book, which adds 4 new factions to the Woodland: the Lizard Cult, the Corvid Conspiracy, the Riverfolk Company, which is the Otters, and the Mole Empire, the Grand Duchy. In addition to those mechanics, it also offers 10 new playbooks, which are character types, including the Pirate, the Raider, the Raconteur, a whole bunch of the Raconteur is a ferret. He's one of my favorite playbooks to look at. All of these give people new way to engage the game, and means we're launching with like 19 character classes from minute 1. We were able to work with Leader to put together 2 decks of cards to help with as play aids with the game. The first is the Denizens deck, which is an illustrated deck of NPCs. It's got about 55 cards. I think 54 of them are illustrated. One of them is an instruction card. And with this, every single card has art from Kyle, almost all of it new, which means that we have a bunch of really awesome NPCs for GMs to add to their game. Same with the equipment deck, which has illustrated versions of each weapon that are available. Gear matters a lot to Vagabonds on the board game, and so it matters a lot here in the role-playing game. And the illustrated deck of weapons allows you to have all of the rules and mechanics for your gear right there with you. And then finally, the faction dice set. We know gamers love dice, and we were able to work with Leader to create a set of 7 dice, 1 or 8 dice, 1 set for each faction, and then 1 set for the Vagabonds. And it's been a really, really cool experience to see people roll these amazing, cool dice. They're very pretty. It's very exciting. Um, in addition to those things, we also have a cool GM pack that includes some notepads that helps the GM manage the game, and a beautiful GM screen that's fully illustrated with all the Vagabonds on it. The back of it has tons and tons and tons of rules, like in one place for the GM to use, and it means that you don't really have to print out materials to run the game. Everything you need is right here. You print out the playbooks for the players, but on the GM side, everything's in one place, and you have access to all of it without having to print out any additional materials. So Root, for us, like I said, we'll probably do another book in the future to bring in some of the new factions that Leaders introduced, but we're launching with a ton of stuff. And I think one of the reasons that we've seen such strong sales is that people who want Root stuff want all of it. Like they'll just buy all of it. Whatever Root's available, they'll take it. And our job is to make sure that they don't regret that purchase when they get home. But it's been really cool to see people get excited about every single one of these components, and we think they're all going to do really well in retail stores, especially when put right next to the board game and everybody's interest in the board game. So again, happy to answer questions at the end about Root, anything we're doing with it. But of course, what's coming next is Avatar Legends, the RPG. If you've looked at the Kickstarter page, it's been quite the big deal. We are currently, literally yesterday, no, Wednesday, sent the book to print. And we are looking at having it in stores in September. Obviously, a lot of this is going to depend on how COVID affects things, how shipping works. But we're now currently looking at a September, October, late Q3, early Q4 release. One of the big challenges we have, obviously, is we have 80,000 backers. So we have a ton of folks to get this out to. In the game, you play a team without an avatar. Nobody plays the avatar. It's a little tough to have one person matter more than anybody else. But in it, you play a team of young heroes who has to embark on adventures to make the world a better place. But because it's Avatar, you can play in any of the 5 eras, from Kyoshi's era to Korra's era. You can play anywhere in the world, and so it's actually up to your group to decide the scope and focus of your adventures. You might defend Republic City. You might take, a single area in Kyoshi's era. You might try to protect the whole world, right, when the Avatar goes missing during the 100-Year War. Across the board, we're really honored to work with Avatar Studios. When we signed the contract in 2020, Avatar Studios hadn't started yet. That Mike and Brian had not come back to Viacom. So it was a real shock, surprise, and just really, really, really interesting experience to have Mike and Brian return as Avatar Studios while we were making the game. And that meant that we could do a whole bunch of cool things, like introduce a whole new history for the Roku era. Avatar Roku is featured in the show, but not much is said about what his time period was like. And there's a big open question about what things look like between Kyoshi's era from the novels and the 100-Year War, which is fairly well documented on the show. So we were actually able to write and contribute canon material that is only published in Avatar Legends, the RPG, on Roku and his era. which was a super cool experience. And I think because of that, and because of the presentation, and because of this fan base, this Kickstarter is the single most successful RPG Kickstarter of all time, with $10+ million in funding. Thanks to Brandon Sanderson. Thanks, buddy. We're no longer in the top 10 of all Kickstarters. I think we're like number 12 now. But like we're still up there. And in terms of games, I think we're like the number 3 of all time behind Gloomhaven and Kingdom Death. So for us, this is not just a cool moment for Magpie. Like, we're obviously very excited, but really an awesome experience in expanding what role-playing games are. There are 80,000 people who are going to get a copy of a Powered by the Apocalypse game in their mailbox. That is surreal to me. Thinking back to that start with Marissa and I in 2011, where raising $500 was our goal, we wake up every day kind of confused about how we got here. And what I can say is I think we got here through the amazing work of our team. That the Avatar Legends Kickstarter, the book, the writing, the game design, we are super proud of this game. We think it is going to stand the test of time. And what we have put as our goal is we would like this to be the Star Wars D6 of the modern era. I want this to be a game that in 10 years, 20 years, people are still talking about as the definitive Avatar experience. Right. And that for us is our goal. And that's what we've been trying to achieve. I personally have run a campaign of about 25 sessions of this thing with the finalized rules. And it is one of the most successful campaigns I've ever run. Watching people participate with Avatar is amazing. Like, I have some role players I've role played with before that were in this campaign, but were maybe not at their best in other systems. They really enjoyed playing in this world, and they brought a lot of passion and energy to it. And so I think it's one of those spaces where we really tried to make a design that tapped into the energy and excitement that people have for this setting. And that's what I think is going to drive this product over the next 10 years. Um, I'm happy to answer questions about it. When the PDF is finalized, we're happy to get it out to folks and show you what the game's going to look like, so you can start to talk about it. There are a whole bunch of products that will be available for this, including a supplement, Wan Shi Tong's Adventure Guide, which will be available for minute 1, a dice set, a deck of cards for running the combat system, which is this cool exchange system where you have like rounds of a duel almost, even with multiple opponents. There's some stuff that we'll be sending you that you can look at and see what's available. But for right now, I think our focus is on making sure all of these things are the best possible things they can be, and then getting them here from China in a relatively quick fashion, since any printing in the US wasn't basically impossible once we crossed the line of ordering 100,000 plus core books. So it's a pretty exciting time to be working in role-playing games, and we're really excited to be doing this project. So thank you. Like, this is one of those adorable kittens for the game. We are really, really, really honored to be working with you all, and really excited about you all reaching out to brand new stores. And I hope today's presentation helped you understand a little bit better about what we do and why we do it, and which of our products might be a good fit for the stores that you work with. As I've said, Root and Avatar, to some degree, easy sales. Like, we're really excited to get those games into people's hands. But we think there's a lot of opportunity for stores to move products like Masks and Zombie World, because those are spaces where those are new products to a lot of people. They're really untapped markets there to show people what RPGs can do. And we're hoping that Root and Avatar really shift the conversation so that Powered by the Apocalypse is acknowledged, as I think it already is, as one of the primary ways that people are engaging with RPGs. It has been an amazing 12 or 13 years since the original Apocalypse World came out. And in that time, so many people, not just us, but so many other designers have published and made games for this system. And it really is something where, there's entire communities of people who have never played anything else. And so we're really excited about the opportunity to have you all represent this sort of new wave of role-playing games to stores that may not yet be carrying them. And I wouldn't be surprised if you're going to see them say, well, yeah, of course, we already carry Monster of the Week, or we already carry Apocalypse World, or we already carry Dungeon World, but expanding upon those titles into a much wider range of Powered by the Apocalypse offerings. So thank you. Scott, you want to lead the Q&A? How does that part work?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Mark, thank you so much for the presentation. It was awesome information. I'll go ahead and pop my screen on here so we can be side by side there. There you go. One of the things that I think is really great about Powered by the Apocalypse is, if you're not familiar with the system, only the players roll dice. And so the GM is usually presenting a story, and it really is a collaborative storytelling event, whereas sometimes other systems where DMs are also rolling dice, they can become confrontational almost, where it's the
Sure.
GM is trying to beat the players as opposed to
Yep.
cheering the players on as they confront these obstacles that the GM is putting in their place. So
100%. I mean, one of the things that we talk about a lot about in our GM sections is that you need to be a fan of your players' characters. Now, being a fan doesn't mean I just give you everything you want. Like John Wick, whoever is John Wick's GM in the John Wick movies, he knows that John built a character to do a particular thing, right? And he wants to see him do it. So he's going to push him really hard, right? And that's being a fan of the players' characters. But it's not being a fan of the players' characters to just make them miserable, to beat them, to win, right? And so we really have a clear focus on creating situations that challenge your players and give them what they're looking for, but it's always clear that you are a fan of their character and what their characters bring into the story.
exactly, and that I think that makes a much more engaging environment. Yeah, in terms of questions, I have a few questions that would help both our sales team and retailers. We can say pretty much there's no geographic sales restrictions on the titles that you've created or that are licensed.
Right, yeah, there's no geographic restrictions. We do require that for Root and Avatar, the international sales be clearly reported separately, but that's a reporting issue, not a sales issue.
Right. And that would happen at the GTS distribution level.
Yep.
We're not asking retailers to provide any kind of documentation back to us. So other questions I had on the curated play program. I'm already seeing some interest expressed in the chat here. So how would we set up games with either our internal sales staff, or if retailers wanted to get involved and try this out? What's the best way to do that?
So the first thing is, I think, just contact Sam and let her know that you have some folks that are interested. There's basically two models we can use. If you have an individual person who just wants to try something, like I said, you can go to our website right now and look at the list of games. Usually things sell out within 24 hours of us posting them. It's popular. Like this, we can't offer enough games, basically. So let us know, not for the next week, but like we'll get you in a game a week or two from now. We'll just reserve a spot before we release the schedule, right? But if you have enough people to run a game, if you've got 4 or 5 sales staff members or 10 people where it's 2 games, we're happy to put together a special game for you all. And that just means that Sam will just have to coordinate a little bit with our GM staff and find somebody who's available for those times.
Okay, and we've got the email here, which we'll include in the it's in the chat now, but we'll also include it in the video when we post that out.
Great.
If you're talking to a retailer who's never done any Powered by the Apocalypse game before, what 2 or 3 titles, you've already mentioned a few, but just to make it more explicit, what 2 or 3 titles from the Magpie catalog would you say these are the ones you want to pick up?
Yeah, I mean, if you've not done Powered by the Apocalypse ever, I mean, I think obviously Root is such a great title because it allows you to sell a fantasy adventure game, which we all know is just such a huge part of the overall RPG market, that's based on a game that people have heard of that they want to see more of. And it's just such a great intersection of so many cool things. Root is a little bit of a heavier game. Like, it is more like D&D. Like, you track equipment, you have harm that you can take. You are looking at being a band of fantasy adventurers. And so I think a nice counterpoint to that is something like Masks, which is very, very narrative, but works in a superhero space in which, like most people, even if they're pretty hardcore D&D fans, are going to accept that, like, yeah, maybe a superhero game should have a different kind of system. And so we've had a lot of success with getting people to try and really enjoy Masks. And then I would say that the last one, for then why we called it out for Zombie World, is because I think, it's very accessible, especially to folks who maybe don't know that much about RPGs, because Zombie World doesn't rely on a lot of the assumptions that I think we have with RPGs, that you're going to read a whole book before you play. I mean, I think we've all had that experience of trying to sell somebody on an RPG and they say, wait, this is a game? You're like, yeah, but it's a book. It's a game and a book. Like, we don't have to do that with Zombie World. It's a box. It has cards inside of it, right? So it's a much easier sell. If you look at our deeper catalog, there are a few titles that I think really operate in a different space, almost as collector's items, right? Or really special experiences. Bluebeard's Bride and Cartel are 2 games. Bluebeard's Bride is about the Bluebeard's Bride fairy tale, where a bride goes through a house and explores the room, sort of like Crimson Peak or any other sort of gothic horror game. Cartel is a Mexican narco fiction game like Breaking Bad or The Wire. And both of those are experiences where, like, for adults who don't play other role-playing games, they can be a kind of special experience that is very different than they might expect from something like D&D or Star Wars or Shadowrun, right? It's something very mature and very thoughtful. And because of that, they come in a different format. They're actually 8x8 books instead of 6x9 or 8.5x11.
And then, excuse me. On your website, you also list a couple of upcoming titles, like Airlock, Armored Society. Are those 2023 down the road kind of look?
Yeah, I mean, like I think it's kind of silly because I feel like people don't believe me, but I'm like, no, really, we never expected to have 80,000 backers. Like, we were planning on, like, if we could compete with the One Ring, like if we could do like 25,000 people, we were like, that would be it. And we're talking to Viacom. We only planned for like a $3 million Kickstarter, and we said we had to tell Viacom, like, this probably isn't going to happen. Okay, like, it's probably not going to happen, but we want to be ready for anything, right? And then we raised $3 million in like the first like 4 days. So, we really have had to re-strategize and rethink our release schedule. Airlock is a space horror version of Zombie World, more like Event Horizon or Annihilation, in which it's a one-shot game in which you explore a space station that's haunted. Armored Society is a new Celtic fairy tale, fantasy game with a new system that we've been working on for a number of years. I would have, if you had asked me in 2020 when those came out, I'd be like, oh, 2022 at the latest, right? And now, yeah, I think it's 2023 for most of those titles. And we have a couple that we're working on right now. Pasión de las Pasiones, we're going to deliver that this year. Urban Shadows, which is our second edition, which is the first second edition of a game we've done, is going to come out this year. And hopefully we're going to see the final Cartel supplements come out, but those obviously are a much smaller audience. In the future, Airlock, Velvet Glove, which is another one of those adult mature games, and Rapscallion are probably the big things we're doing in the future. Rapscallion is a sort of Pirates of the Caribbean magical world PBTA game. So it's pirate PBTA in which you play a crew of pirates, a found family who are journeying around having adventures together in a sort of hijinks-filled world. So undead pirate crews and sea monsters and cyclops and books that are magic, and it's a really, really cool vision from the artist Whistler, who's actually doing all the art and writing for the game. We've been really lucky to work with her on it.
This sounds really interesting. The pirate one in particular sounds interesting. But
yeah, and we'll be releasing a quick start for that here in the next couple months, and when we do, we'll pass it over to you guys so you can see how that's coming together.
Great. Yeah, awesome. Let's see, other questions. So Zombie World sounds like it can be done either as a one shot or you can maintain a persistent campaign.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you can play Zombie World just as a cool zombie movie. In that case, maybe the GM turns up the intensity dial, like, stuff happens faster, or as kind of a long running show like The Walking Dead. And one of the reasons we picked it for this kind of product was we were looking for something that, both those modes needed to make sense. Airlock will be explicitly a one shot game, or two shot game, one short movie like story. But Zombie World is really built that if you want to tell a Walking Dead story over 11 seasons, knock yourself out. Like, we've talked with people who've done it.
Wow. Thank you guys for your time. Thank you for being here. We really appreciate it. Appreciate the attention to Magpie's product lines, not just Root and Avatar, but also some of the other products that got them to where they are now. So exciting stuff. Very thrilling.
Yeah, thank you all so much. I mean, we especially as we've kind of grown up in the industry, have just ever more respect every year for the pieces that I think a lot of gamers don't even know exist. So thank you so much for being out there as an advocate for us and our games. And I think this is just such an exciting time to work in this industry, because what was normal 5-10 years ago is not normal anymore. It's a totally different world. And that the streaming, the advent of new systems, the way that people are publishing games about new topics, and the growth in the market itself, both in terms of its size but also its diversity. We're really excited to be partners in this new time, and I'm looking forward to what 2030 looks like after so much change from 2012.
Yeah, it's really also hit the mainstream pop culture and become much more acceptable. More and more people are reaching out, trying to get these experiences, and we're happy to already be here to provide those.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, as a kid who got put in trash cans in middle school for reading Dungeons and Dragons, I will still never get over the fact that Critical Role has a couple million people watching it.
it's crazy. thank you once again for being here and for your engagement with the presenters. I really appreciate it.